You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup, recovery, and cyber recovery. In this episode, we tackled the critical challenge of detecting ransomware before it wreaks havoc on your systems. I've got Dr. Mike Saylor from Blackswan Security here to break down the various tools and techniques that you need to know about, from XDR to SOAR and everything in between. We're diving into real-world examples of how ransomware gets spotted, what signs to watch for, and why you might want to think twice about handling this stuff on your own. Of course, Prasanna joins us too as we explore why that weird network traffic might be more sinister than you think. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years. Ever since I had to tell my boss that we had no backups of the production database that we had just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this podcast. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated backup admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the show. If I could ask you to take a quick second and subscribe or follow us wherever you watch or listen to the podcast. Remember, you can watch us on YouTube or you can follow us on any of your favorite podcast platforms with the same name, the Backup Wrap-Up. I am W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I have with me a guy who just for some reason wants to know how much Dexter I watch. Is Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna?
I'm good, Curtis. Yeah, Dexter is a great show. It's been a while since I've watched it. Here's the thing. Some shows I'll go back and rewatch. Some shows I'm kind of on the fence whether I want to go back and dedicate that much time to watching. And there are some really, really good shows. Like I know you just recently rewatched Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
You are currently rewatching West Wing at the same time that you are watching Dexter.
Yeah.
Right?
There's
and
that.
I totally get it, but yeah, it's just one of those things like it's such an amazing show. I don't want to ruin that memory that I have the first time I watched the show.
It's a really good show. It's a very dark show, right? I tell people, you have to ask yourself whether or not you think you could root for a serial killer. Right? If you don't think in your wildest imagination that you could root for a serial killer, it's probably not for you. Even if he's a good serial killer, with a code. Although, in the episodes that I'm starting to get to, he's starting to break the code.
No spoilers.
Yeah. Anyway, spoilers. But yeah, every time I talk to you, you're like, how many episodes of Dexter did you watch last night?
It does give you some great ideas on potentially how to get away with a murder.
Yeah.
Just saying.
That's why I somebody heard, so, like for some reason women really like the murder podcasts, right? And guys are like, yeah, it's training. But anyway, it's time to bring on our guest once again, our resident cybersecurity expert, CEO of Blackswan Security, Mike Saylor. How's it going, Mike?
It's going well, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Do you watch Dexter?
I've watched some Dexter. It's not on my binge list, but I've watched it.
It's a good show. But hey, we're not here to talk about death and dismemberment. We're talking about something just as horrible, ransomware. How's it been going? You've been, I don't know, the last time I talked to you, you were knee deep in an incident, but that's probably a Tuesday for you.
It's usually Thursdays.
Yeah.
Bad guys, talking about bad guys with ethics. They try to give you the benefit of the weekend.
So nice of them.
Yeah.
Do you ever get weekends off, or are you often, in the throes of one of these things?
No, there's quite a few weekends off. depending on how well prepared an organization is, if it happens on Thursday, and yeah, there's some things that they'll have to address maybe over the weekend, but for the most part, you can get them secured and triaged, midnight Friday night, and they may have to rebuild, reimage, and redeploy over the weekend. But that's kind of the incident response specialists and leads have done their job in putting the fire out. So it's usually we get a call on Thursday and we work the weekend. We get a call on Thursday and we try to get it handled by the weekend, or we get a call during the weekend. So Sunday afternoon is another common phone call. So if the Cowboys are playing, that's a good distraction. I'd rather deal with ransomware than watch that game in a lot of cases. So
hey, at least you have a football team. I live in San Diego. We used to have a football team. They moved up to Los Angeles, and I call them the Who. If people are like, "Oh, do you still follow the Chargers?" and I'm like, "The Who?"
Right.
Yeah. So at least you got a team. So this week I wanted to talk about the actual phase, or what the things that we need to do in order to detect ransomware. And I remember talking about this a little bit with you before, but can you, aside from like a SIM SOAR tool sort of going off and noticing something, can you think of weird things that have happened in people's environments where it ended up being, the ultimate thing was they were actually under a ransomware attack? You know what I'm saying? Like for some reason the company dishwasher stopped working, and it turned out. Do you have any weird stories like that?
I do, and so there's malware. There's a category of malware called polymorphic. So it changes. Some of that change depends on what the malware has identified as its host. And so there is a strain. There are strains of malware that are specific to certain. They're targeting specific devices. We saw this with Stuxnet. We saw it with point of sale specific malware, and now there's ransomware that is looking for specific hosts. It doesn't want to trigger the ransomware on an invaluable host. Like, I don't care if that's got ransomware, just throw it out the window. And then tip its cards to what the attackers are doing. They don't want to trigger the alarms before the jewels are stolen. So there are kind of your analogy to the dishwasher's not working anymore. If it's a smart dishwasher, it could very well start to malfunction or perform poorly if malware is interrogating it to determine if it's its target. There's even malware, the ransomware that cleans up after itself. So maybe it gets to the dishwasher and decides, well, this is a dishwasher, and it moves on. Well, as it moves on, it deletes it cleans up after itself. So when you go look at the dishwasher, you're like, I don't know what caused that. But
yeah, it seems to be working fine now.
More often than not, it's user feedback about complaining about their computer running slowly, or I can't watch Netflix at lunch anymore.
No Dexter at lunch.
Right. So it's usually system performance degradation or just weird stuff, symptoms, weird symptomatic stuff that usually you get notifications on to determine, well, that's weird. But then you go look at it and there's nothing there. Well, forensically you can still see some stuff, but at the kind of the surface level, you're like, there's no malware here.
But in that case, so like, I'm guessing that user would call their IT help desk, and the IT person would probably take a look and be like, oh yeah, nothing happened. And then they probably just close it and move on, right? How often does it really get escalated? Be like, hey, that seems weird. Let's figure out, like, is there a security issue or something else?
The frequency or I guess the likelihood that gets escalated is almost directly related to whether or not they've had to deal with it in the past. So if you've had ransomware, you're a little more diligent and suspicious of weird stuff happening. Like, all right, well, we don't want to go through that again. I'm gonna take every call about weird stuff happening as if it might be ransomware or some other malware, versus an environment where maybe they haven't had to put a fire out or go through that. They're a little more skeptical about that's just user error, or it's Tuesday.
Do anybody does anybody ever report actually seeing like someone taking over their desktop? Like they happen to see mouses moving around or windows opening and closing. Do they see that?
We have worked a few. One was a water district where they thought they were compromised because the mouse was moving and stuff was happening. So we've seen that report. That particular incident turned out to be, Bob took the day off but forgot to do something, so he logged in and everybody thought Bob was not there, and so why is this mouse moving? So that turned out to be kind of funny. But
what we have here is a failure to communicate.
Right. But then there's other cases, and this is actually in a corporate environment, we don't see it as often, but small businesses and individuals often get scammed into the whole, you've got a virus, call this phone number, we then remote access into your machine, and then their access persists or something else happened to drive that weird behavior. But in a corporate environment, well, you know what? I take that back. So the other problem that we've run into is managed service providers. So you've got this one company that supports the technology to some degree, whether it's everything, servers and workstations and help desk is all outsourced, or it's something specific like a core processing server that does your financials if you're a credit union. So you have this one-to-many relationship. You've got this one company that supports many clients, and just human nature, we want to make sure that that's as easy as possible. So what we found were what we call coincidental passwords. So this one vendor uses the same credentials to log into all of their clients. And so what we've seen recently is, there's this remote control stuff going on because that vendor was compromised and they didn't know it. But now bad guys have access to the environments of all the clients they support.
There was a big one a few years ago where it was a dentist. It was a dental service provider. I remember where they were like the software that every dentist uses in the U.S. and it was that kind of thing. And so basically, they were able to take control of hundreds of dentists around the U.S. I remember that.
Oh darn! My dental appointment got canceled. It's probably it was probably a kid that didn't want to go to the dentist, and he's the one that pulled that off.
Yeah, whenever I think about the dentist, I think about Steve Martin and what's the oh darn it, it'll come to me later. There's a musical. It was a Broadway musical, and then they made a movie of it starring Rick Moranis, and Steve Martin plays the sadistic dentist. If you want a good laugh, go type in YouTube and type in Steve Martin dentist. It's a good laugh. Anyway, go ahead.
So what we've been talking about so far is sort of users noticing something odd happening, calling in, right, getting in troubleshooting. But I'm guessing though that users aren't always the best people to recognize when things go wrong, and they're probably not always at their desk when the bad actor is doing something. So what happens for all those other scenarios?
So there's other things that we do in a corporate environment that we hopefully would notice weird things. Our backups, our network bandwidth, and there's tons of places that you can set up alerts and triggers, firewall, weird IP addresses, different protocols, unexpected data going out, different ports. There's a lot of things we could look at, and it's a pretty lengthy list, but humanly possible. Like, is there one person that's going to go down this whole checklist every day, several times a day? That's not feasible. And so you've really got to roll that up into a tool that can automate it and just give you a dashboard view of things. And the secret, the key is how much visibility do we have? Finding tools and the data sources and the use cases that all line up. Like there's a ransomware use case. All right, so from if our focus or objective is to identify ransomware, then working backwards from that objective, we've got to find the data sources that would give us the indicators. Then we've got to have the technology that can consume or connect and consume that data source. Then we've got to have some policy procedure around the source of that data. Like, what is it? Is it a server? Firewall? How is it configured? How do we patch it? How do we update it? How do we back it up? So that playbook is fairly extensive, but the detection part of that is all about visibility, and I guess fundamentally too, understanding how ransomware works. Because your smart dishwasher probably isn't going to get infected with ransomware.
Not yet.
Not yet. Now your internet connected Instapot. There's actually been at least laboratory examples of getting malware on your Instapot, because you can make the display say different things, or your voting machine, I guess, is a good relevant near-term scenario.
Well, those should not be network connected, so hope not.
Well, we say should a lot, but people get involved and people do inconsistent things.
Yeah. So it's interesting, our last episode was actually about election integrity. So it's just interesting that you mentioned that. I'll just say that, well, in any voting machine that I am aware of, the design does not have a network connection, but we can have a whole other discussion about that. But so we did have a discussion, though, sometimes with our red team member. He talked about using he used the television, the smart TV in the lobby of the company to hack the rest of the environment. And basically he figured out what the TV was. They bought the TV. They reverse engineered it, figured out how to hack it, and then used that as a way to bridge into the environment. Mm-hmm. So when we start talking about this, we've got to start talking about some sort of tools that are, and there's 3 tools that I'm aware of, and which would be XDR, SIM, and SOAR. SOAR is more about the response, right? But XDR and SIM tools are about the actual detection. Did I get that right?
So the XDR is the platform that you would consolidate all of your alerts and data sources from different other tools. So it's kind of like the top of your security stack.
Okay.
And then the SIM is kind of below that. So SIM is one of the feeds sources into your XDR platform. EDR, your anti-malware endpoint stuff, that's another data source. And
I just thought all the EDR tools were calling themselves XDR tools. That's what it looked
and
like.
They're really not.
Okay.
The evolution of EDR into more of a managed service is still missing the network layer. So the EDRs like CrowdStrike that say that they do XDR, I think their definition, I think it's a terminology problem. XDR, the extended detect respond. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're expanding their visibility, out from just workstations and servers, and they're doing some other stuff. But really, it's just the managed service and response capabilities that they're putting on top of their EDR solution. But they're still missing the east-west, network traffic, net flow.
Okay.
Firewall.
So EDR, sorry to interrupt, EDR would be endpoint detection and response, which typically what we're talking about there is like desktops and laptops and things like that, not so much servers. Would that be right?
Well, servers too. I mean, you can put
Okay.
EDR on servers for sure.
Okay.
But not necessarily networks, like network
Yeah,
switches.
CrowdStrike doesn't do network analysis, and so even before, the first kind of acronym was NDR, network layer stuff. So that's like extra hop, NetFlow, your router, tripwire type stuff, and then we have the anti-malware, the antivirus group grew into anti-malware. Now that's an EDR, so it's managed with, and it's really that's not a new concept. It's really just console view of your anti-malware deployment, and that's been around for a long time. But then as a managed service, we want to call it something. So there's your EDR. So it's more than just monitoring and managing. It's also the ability to respond. So now we have NDR and EDR. Well, then MDR came into play. And the idea with MDR was now we can look at network, primarily network. And then the evolution
What's
of
the M stand for?
Monitor, detect, respond.
Oh, okay.
But like MSSPs, the managed security service providers, they're also /MDR. That's our delivery service. Well, then that's expanded now to say, well, I can, depending on my SIM, and MDR was primarily just a SIM solution. That's the top of their stack. Well, is your SIM technology capable of ingesting the EDR data from your EDR console or your endpoints? It was really good at NDR if you had the technology in your environment to collect and provide the network east-west traffic.
Yeah.
So even MDR at the beginning was just like syslog, server, events, and your firewall, and that was pretty much it. Well, then XDR in every case, network, the MDR component that does a little bit more than network, and then the EDR, XDR. The idea with XDR, the extended detect, is now we can plug anything into our console. So that's our SIM, that's anti-malware, NetFlow, and even like some XDR platforms can do like physical security devices like badges and motion cameras and IoT things, like, hey, my dishwasher's throwing errors a bunch. You can, I guess, if there's a use case for that. So the idea with XDR, and even broader than that, is an open XDR platform that just about anything you can imagine can be fed into this thing to correlate events and if it's capable, develop behavioral baselines and some other cool stuff.
So then, where does SOAR fit into that? All of that.
So SOAR is also not a new term. So SOAR is Security Orchestration and Automated Response. So the idea with SOAR is that we have this playbook, and historically it's been a manual playbook, right? We get out the book and we look through it and say, this is what we're going to do in response to whatever this thing is. So it could be an incident, it could be a malware, it could be stolen laptop, whatever. You've got this playbook. And the idea with playbooks is you assess yourself, like our company does these things and we have these assets, and what is the most likely impact to us? Ransomware is at the top, should be at the top of everybody's list these days. If you're connected to the internet and have users, ransomware is just statistically more likely than a lot of other things these days. But it could be other stuff. You should have a playbook on denial of service if your company relies on internet connectivity for revenue and communications. If you have a large remote workforce and they have laptops that have company data on it, that you should have a playbook on stolen laptops.
Is this similar to the incident response plan stuff we talked about a couple or many episodes ago?
It is. And however, SOAR traditionally, and I was getting to that, the SOAR traditionally was more broadly defined. So you could have something that might not be considered an incident yet.
Gotcha.
So SOAR back in the day also incorporated, well, how do we analyze this event? And then we started developing more technical incident response plans and programs that said, all right, that playbook is now part of our plan, and here are the more technical, tactical things we need to do. Well, then the evolution of SOAR from a platform or technology perspective is, all right, how do we automate some of this stuff?
Yeah.
And so there are third-party tools that, all right, so our SIM, our XDR platform identified this stuff. Let's integrate this automation tool, or we have this tool now that we can then go and use to say we need to handle this incident.
So as an example, could it be something like, I've detected some random network traffic on this particular client that doesn't look right. The SOAR detects it, and maybe it shuts off the network port.
Yes. And so in the SOAR, you would again define these playbooks. When this happens, do these things. And so with ransomware, as an example, if user account experiences several failed logins and then a successful login, and then service, anti-malware is shut off on the endpoint, and there is internet traffic to geo, whatever IP address around the world, do these things, right? Disable user, revoke MFA tokens, shun or quarantine that endpoint, take it off the, block its IP address, notify whoever, and do these things. You can automate that. And it can be as detailed as that. It could be any variation of that. So yeah, that's a great example of how that tool, and it would do it so quick, like milliseconds, versus the human version of that is, your SIM tool pops up and says, you've got something to look into. An analyst takes 15 to 20 minutes to verify it. We have a valid thing. Let me escalate it to level 2. Level 2 looks at it, another 15, 20 minutes. Now we're looking at other data sources like the firewall and some stuff. We've now validated that. Then we escalate that to the client if it's an MSP version, or the business owner or the stakeholder in a corporate environment. And we're waiting for a response from them to determine what to do next. And so now that millisecond SOAR automated response has turned into, at a minimum, hour and a half, 2 hours. And who knows what, that malware is, especially the ones that can run autonomously, they've already done reconnaissance to look at what else this thing has access to, and I've already spread and done other stuff.
Yeah.
Time is of the essence.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's say I'm a company, I'm an organization that has none of these tools. Right? I'm listening to this episode. I'm like, holy crap! Like, how many things do I need to buy, and where should I start? I think that's where the average person might be right now. I mean, it's where I am. I'm like, wow, that's an awful lot of tools. Where, and each of them thinks they're well, you got to have this, you got to have MDR, you got to have XDR, you got to have SIM, you got to have SOAR, you got to have all these things. And I'm sure there's an acronyms that we haven't got to. Where does, I'm worried that I'm going to get ransomware. Where do I start with all these tools?
There's a lot of different approaches to the problem, and understanding the problem is fundamentally economics, right? I can't afford the people or the software or whatever it is to truly improve my odds. And that's really what it is. I mean, you can invest everything you have in protecting yourself, and you're still a statistic at some point, because bad guys are going to figure out how to get to you. But remember that ransomware is malware, and all malware requires user interaction in order to infect your thing. So your computer, if it's not connected to the internet and you're not looking at email and going to websites, you're good, right? Or you're 99% there. You also have to disable all your USB ports and Bluetooth and all that other stuff too, which means you really can't use your computer for anything. So then, but if you start there, all right, if my computer's not connected to anything, what can I do? Well, I can't do much. Well, I need to do this thing. Well, what do I need to do that thing? Well, I need internet to get to this website so I can log in to do my work. Okay, well then can we exclude the majority of other things that you don't need to do? Yeah, all right, so we can write policy about that. That's okay. Well, what else do you need? Oh, I need email. I need email to be able to send and receive files and talk to people. Okay. Well, are there ways of restricting email's ability to present me with things that could be a risk? Well, yeah, that's, email filtering and spam filtering and some of that stuff. Some of those tools, some of that stuff that I've mentioned is probably already a capability of what you've purchased. Like Office 365 comes with some good stuff. They just don't do a real good job at teaching you how to use it and configure it.
Right.
And us as consumers are really poor at reading the manual.
It also comes with some other stuff but they do charge quite a bit for it.
They do, and
right?
so
yeah.
But going back to how many tools do I need to buy? That's another decision. Do I buy more licensing and capabilities from this one tool, or do I look at what other things can I bolt on and add to this? Maybe it's more cost effective, but now you've got overhead in having to spend more time doing these other tools.
Right.
Well, then, all right. So you've been somewhat diligent. You're using your computer responsibly, and you've figured out how to use what you've paid for to do what you can with what you have. Mm-hmm. Then it all comes down to just being aware and that email from so and so, the
invoice,
it's an email about a PDF you need to sign.
Yeah.
Well, were you expecting a PDF to sign? Did you just sign random PDFs? You just can't wait to wake up in the morning and look for a PDF to sign in your inbox.
The file transfer, the money, you know what I mean?
So
that's another big one is like, you get the thing from the boss saying, I need you to do this EFT to this new customer, right?
Yeah. And you need to call your boss. People that are sending you stuff to sign, people that are asking you for money, those are important things.
Yeah.
Call them.
Yeah.
Call your boss. Call, that vendor that sent you something to sign. And
don't use the number that's on the invoice.
Yeah, don't call the number not the number that they sent you. It's kind of like back in the day with credit card fraud. Hey, your account there's a problem with your account, call this number. Well,
right.
That number's on the back of your debit card too, so you should call that number, not the number they texted you.
Yeah, and I would say you should call the boss's cell phone, not something on the company phone system if you still have one.
That's a great point too. But kind of at the end of the day, and maybe getting back to your original question with, well, how does the average person protect themselves? It starts with just being diligent. Just take a minute and think through the rationale of whatever it is that you were going to do. Click on something, open something, download something, go to a website, scan a QR code with your phone. These are all things that you maybe just take a minute and really think through. Do I need to do that? Was I expecting that? Could there be something, malicious or wrong with whatever this is? And it never hurts to phone a friend. And making friends is important in this in cyber, because as an individual, you're probably not going to be exposed to or experience a lot of things. And then the more people you talk to about what you see and your questions, the more likely you're going to get somebody that's probably already made that mistake and can help you not make it yourself.
Yeah. And Mike, just on that last point, I think it's a great thing. And I know we did an entire discussion about like cyber insurance, right? And how they're like a trusted advisor. You should talk to them because I'm sure they could give you good advice on sort of how to shore up your defenses and be able to detect and protect yourself against ransomware and other malware.
And there's a couple of real quick like things to consider. If you think you've got ransomware or malware, just turn your computer off. Like power it off. Take the battery out, unplug it, because that stuff needs power to do its job. And if you really think, I've got my whole life is on this computer, I think I have malware, shut it off, unplug it, take the battery out, and find somebody that can help you get your data off of it and make sure it's clean. And that way, at least you've got a backup. Backups are critical with ransomware. But yeah, don't just sit there. It's kind of like, especially guys, and I'm definitely guilty. I'm a little hard-headed when it comes to illness and health. If you've got symptoms, call the doctor. Right? Don't sit there and go, "Oh, I'll give it another day," or maybe I just need a nap.
Yeah, which brings up, and this is a giant tee up, but it would seem to me that this is too important for you to try to figure it out yourself. Like if you're not a cybersecurity specialist, if you're not living your life this thing, it's kind of like backup, right? Where it's like it's way more difficult than you think it is, right? And that's why MSSPs exist, right? And so it would seem to me that rather than try to figure out which of 10 different, I mean, somebody showed me a it was like one of those things where they have just company logos, and it was like the cybersecurity landscape, and there were like just hundreds of these logos up there of products and services that I could buy. And it would seem to me that what I need two things. I need tools that work, right? That do the things that I need. And more importantly, I need somebody that knows how to use those tools, because it doesn't do any good if I buy this great, detection tool to find, what's going on, but I don't know how to configure it so that it works, and I don't know what to do. And of course, one of the most common things is that I configured it such a way that I get a whole bunch of false positives, and then very quickly it just ends up becoming ignored, right?
Yep.
So I think that's where the MSSP, and obviously I'm teeing it up for you, but I don't know what else would be right for a small organization or even a medium-sized organization that has never done this before.
No, I appreciate that. And you're right. Going back to kind of the initial comments of, just good visibility. If you want to do it yourself, make sure you have the fundamentals, good anti-malware that gives you a consolidated view of all your assets. You don't have to go to every computer and see if there's an infection. It needs to report up to a console that you can log into and get real updates and know where the problems are. The other gap, I mean, you mentioned needing someone that knows the technology and, an expert, but to expand on that, it needs to be someone that's available 24 hours a day, because bad guys aren't going to go, oh, they're probably still at work working on the computer. Now's a good time to attack them. No, it's when you're asleep and you're in the middle of the night. Thursday morning or Thursday after midnight is when they're going to hit you, and because they also know that you're not going to want to be at work over the weekend, so they, for whatever reason, all right, they're not going to make it easy for you, and in a lot of cases that's also because they're overseas in a different time zone anyway. So the fundamentals are good endpoint protection, the good visibility across your environment, good firewall, cloud, Office 365, Google, AWS, whatever you got, whatever's being used. And then someone that you can call, or someone that is looking at your stuff 24 hours a day. And there are some service providers where, maybe you do have a staff during the day. And so you just need nights and weekends and holidays. And so there are some providers like us that are flexible in that regard. So that does help with cost and the economics. But at the end of the day, absolutely make friends with some experts that you can call for nothing else. If nothing else, just to ask questions. But ideally, someone that can help you identify the right solutions to give you the right visibility and the right coverage. And again, it's got to be 24 hours a day.
Yeah. So, Mike, most of these organizations, right, they don't have unlimited budget, right? Cost is always a concern.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of priority, right? I know you talked about endpoint, you talked about XDR, you talked about SIM, right? You talked about all these things. If they're looking for sort of what is the first thing that they should go after and try to protect or detect ransomware on or malware on, what is sort of like the most important thing in their environment that they should be concerned with?
It depends. It really does depend. I mean, some businesses. So you've really got back to understanding yourself before you can understand your enemy, because your enemy is going to probably know you better than you do in order to be successful. You've really got to understand your business. And so again, if your business is highly driven by your workforce, and your workforce is out, on the they're road warriors or they're working from home, absolutely endpoint protection is a priority, because they probably have company data on that device, or they're using that device to log into VPN or your cloud. And so if that device is compromised, then your production network, your production environment may be compromised also. But what if you're a data center and you don't have all your endpoints are servers, right? And then but then they're also co-managed. They're not yours. You own the hardware, but you don't own the virtual machines or what have you. So now your focus is your perimeter and your connectivity. So I think those are two extreme, one end of the other. But truly understand your environment first, and where your critical assets are, and your data and your use cases, and what's most likely impacting your business. And then from that, derive your priorities. And there are some organizations that fit smack dab in the middle, and you just have to have good hygiene across all of it. Yeah. I could probably go on for hours on a good approach to this, but the other,
it all depends. Yeah.
Next episode.
The other real quick thing, in order to know how, and this kind of tags on to know yourself, but there's a lot of organizations that aren't real familiar or real accurate with all the things they need to protect anyway. Similar to backups, I can run backup, but I can only back up what I know about. And ideally, even more so to the next level, how do I prioritize those backups? Security is the same. I can only secure what I know. And if there's stuff on the network and there's stuff in the cloud and there's people working from home that I don't know, then I can't protect that. And if I am going to protect it, how do I protect it? That visibility part, how do I get the data from those things, those tools, to know if there's a problem and how to respond to it? Is it automated? Is it a person? And then all of that is going to kind of bubble up to what are my options and what does it cost and what do I need? Is that something I can do on my own? Is that opportunity to bring in a managed service provider? And I think real quick on the cost, I think there's a big misconception that I'm a small company, I can't afford cybersecurity. That is a huge misconception. There are a number of providers out there like us that are flexible and scalable. And I mean, our smallest, we have clients that just have 2 employees and they work out of their garage, but they've determined from an analysis of themselves that they have a huge cyber risk and they need that protection. And so it can be affordable if we know what we're protecting and what the playbooks are.
I know a couple of guys that do a podcast from their dining room. Well, hey, Mike, it's been great talking to you again. The whole thing of there's a lot of people, by the way, who literally say, I don't have enough money for backup too, right? And you just makes my head explode. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. All right, folks, in persona, thanks for being here as always.
Yeah, no, this was fun. And Mike, it's been great chatting. It's been a while, so glad to have you back on.
For sure. And missed you guys.
And yeah. And thanks to our listeners. We'd be nothing without you. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.